Hey, you're there. If you like the content I bring, your help is essential. For the channel to remain active and grow more and more, I need your support. Every new follower is a huge incentive to continue creating exciting stories and videos full of rides and trips. Also, by subscribing, you help me turn this passion into sustainable work, which allows me to offer you even more surprising content. As soon as you don't forget to subscribe, please like and share. Your participation makes everything different. She believed that love was enough. Julia dedicated herself completely to Bruno, giving not only her heart, but her peace, her essence. They spent years building a story where she was the foundation and he, the weight. He said he loved her, but he was never there. Always absent at important moments, always with vague excuses and glances that avoided hers. Julia put up with it. She believed it was a phase that all love goes through trials. But nothing could prepare her for what was to come. That night she felt something strange. The message on Bruno's cell phone sparked her suspicions. It wasn't just a co-worker. It was too intimate, too familiar. Julia's heart raced. She took a deep breath. She opened his cell phone, and the world fell apart. Photos, messages, declarations of love, all with another woman, a betrayal carefully cultivated for months, and worse, with her best friend. Her hands were shaking, her eyes were watering, but she didn't cry. Not here. Julia looked at Bruno, who, upon seeing her with the cell phone in her hand, turned pale. He tried to justify it, stumbling over his words. It was a mistake, he said, a slip. But the messages said otherwise. There, Bruno was a different man, affectionate, engaging, passionate. With her, Julia, he was just the rest of the day, the leftover, the reserve. And the worst part, her friend Camilla knew everything. She knew about Julia's pain, her fears, her sleepless nights. She knew, and even so, she slept with the man she said was like a brother. The ground opened up beneath her feet, but Julia didn't scream. She didn't hit. She didn't beg. She just left, silently, firmly. But inside her, something was starting to die, and something new was starting to be born, something cold, calculated. She still loved, but love was now something else. It was hate turned upside down. Julia disappeared for weeks. She turned off social media, changed her number, refused visits. She was hurt, yes, but she was also thinking, planning. The pain, once paralyzing, was now fuel. She looked at herself in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. The woman who was there was different, thinner, harder in her eyes, more silent. She began to list everything she had set aside for Bruno. The dreams shelved, the opportunities rejected, the friends she had distanced herself from. Her anger began to take the form of goals. Julia went back to school, joined the gym, revamped her wardrobe. Each step was a reconstruction. But the memory of Camilla and Bruno, laughing together, touching each other, still burned. And she promised herself they would pay, not with scandal, not with impulsive revenge, but with the slowest and sweetest pain ever seen, contempt and overcoming. 6 months passed. Julia re-emerged as a version no one expected. Beautiful, confident, proud. She returned to the job market at a company that competed with Bruno's, and in a short time, she was gaining ground. Fate, always ironic, put her back in their path. A corporate event. Bruno was there, holding hands with Camilla, now admittedly his new love. Julia entered the room like a silent storm. She didn't need to say anything. She was noticed. And they noticed her. Camilla tried to hide her discomfort. Bruno stared at her for too long. It was impossible not to compare. While Julia shone, Camilla seemed dazzled. It was the first act of Julia's silent revenge, to show that Contrary to what they imagined, she had not been destroyed. On the contrary, she had been reborn. After the event, Bruno sent a message. "You look beautiful. Can we talk?" Julia laughed, that cold, empty laugh. She didn't answer. Indifference would be the greatest punishment, but inside, she still felt. Not for him, but for the betrayal. She didn't allow herself to cry anymore, but sometimes at night, she found herself staring at the ceiling, reliving everything. It was a mourning that still required silence. Therapy helped, but the wound still throbbed. So she decided to focus on work. And yet another irony of fate appeared. Her new project would put her directly above Camilla. Yes, her former best friend had recently been hired for a lower position. Julia took a deep breath. She knew she would be tempted to throw everything she had been through in her face. But she decided not to lower herself. At least, not so soon. Revenge needed time, cold, well-served, and she was just beginning. Camilla saw her on her first day at work and turned pale. She tried to make conversation, to remember the old times, but Julia was curt, cordial, but lethal. "We are just colleagues here," she said, and she turned her back. Camilla felt the weight of those words. Deep down, she knew she had lost something more valuable than any relationship, the trust of someone who loved her like a sister. Bruno, in turn, began sending her more frequent messages. He said he missed her. He said that things were different with Camilla, but not as expected. He was unhappy, and he wanted to get back together. Julia deleted each message without replying, but she read them all. It was like feeding an internal fire, a reminder of what he was, of what she would never accept again. She didn't want Bruno anymore. She wanted him to live long enough to regret having lost her. And that she would make sure of. Time passed and Julia began to get involved with someone else. Enrique, intelligent, kind, and possessed a rare sense of humor. He didn't intrude, he respected her time and he admired her strength. Julia was reluctant to trust her, but there was something different about Enrique. With him, she laughed again. She felt light. But Camila, upon seeing this, freaked out. She started spreading rumors at work, trying to destabilize her. She invented a story that Julia was having an affair with a superior who was using her beauty to get promotions. Julia ignored it until a sexist comment came up in a meeting. That's when she understood. She had to react. She called Camilla for a formal conversation, and with evidence and witnesses, she exposed her. The company acted quickly. Camilla was fired, and Julia promoted, not out of revenge, but because of her competence. It was the second act, without having to raise her voice. Bruno found out about Camilla's dismissal and was in despair. He tried to talk to Julia, tried to confront her, saying that she had ruined Camilla's life. Julia just stared at him. "I only did the right thing. You chose to sleep with a snake. Now deal with the bites." Bruno left, stunned. And in the days that followed, Julia learned that he had asked for leave for emotional reasons. Did she feel sorry? No. She felt justice. The woman they had betrayed was now their ruin. But Julia knew that, in order to truly move on, she needed to let go of the past. Enrique was still by her side, even without fully understanding her silences. And one day, Julia finally allowed herself to tell him everything. The past, the pain, the betrayal. He listened. He didn't judge her. He just hugged her. And there, Julia realized, maybe it was still possible to start over. The last part of revenge would be the hardest, forgiving herself. Julia realized that for a long time, she had carried guilt for having trusted too much, for having loved wrongly, for having let herself be destroyed. But none of that was a mistake. It was just part of the journey. She started writing about her story, not to publish, but to free herself. And when she saw it all on paper, she understood how much she had grown. Bruno and Camilla were just chapters, and Henrique, maybe a new beginning. But it didn't depend on him. It depended on her. Julia was no longer the woman who had been betrayed. She was the woman who had survived, who had rebuilt herself, who knew how to transform pain into strength, and who now, finally, was loving again. But this time, herself. Julia and Henrique traveled together for the first time, a weekend in the mountains. Between wine and fireplaces, Julia felt safe. There were no masks, just comfortable silence. At night, sitting under the stars, Henrique held her hand. "Do you have any idea how strong you are?" She laughed, looking away. But deep down, that's how she felt. Strong, still hurt, yes, but resilient. She didn't expect fairy tales. She just wanted the truth. And Henrique offered that. For the first time in years, Julia was not afraid of what was to come. Because now, even if everything fell apart again, she would know. She could get back on her feet, with or without anyone by her side. Months later, Henrique asked her to be his girlfriend. Simple, direct, with sincerity in his eyes. Julia said yes, not out of need, but by choice. She had learned that love is not a prison, it is a partnership. And if one day it ended, that was okay. She would not sacrifice herself for anyone again. At work, she continued to grow. She became a reference in the I field, invited to lectures and interviews. She was respected, and more than that, she was free. One day, at one of these lectures, she saw Bruno in the audience. He looked at her with admiration and regret. He wanted to speak, but did not have the courage. Julia just smiled slightly, without resentment, without wanting to hurt. He was past. She was present. Julia decided to publish her book, the story of her fall and rise. She received support, criticism, applause. But most importantly, she helped other women, women like her, who loved wrong, who were betrayed, who thought they had lost their way. Her story spread, and she felt whole, complete, not out of revenge, but out of overcoming, not out of forgetting, but out of transformation. Bruno and Camilla disappeared from her world. Maybe they broke up, maybe not. But that didn't matter. Julia had won, and her victory was silent, elegant, firm, just like she had become. Years passed. Julia was now an author, a speaker, a mentor. She had a quiet home, a light routine. Henrique was still by her side. He was never perfect, but he was real. And she knew how to appreciate that. Sometimes, when she looked back, Julia was amazed at how much she had endured, and how much she had rebuilt herself. She would meet women who were at rock bottom and say, "It hurts, I know, but it will pass. And when it does, you will no longer accept crumbs." Because the love she learned to give herself was whole. It was non-negotiable. On a rainy afternoon, she received an anonymous message. It was from Camilla. She asked for forgiveness. She said she was sorry, destroyed. Julia read it. She took a deep breath, and she didn't respond. Not out of pride, but because she had already overcome it. She didn't need to hear any more excuses. She had already forgiven herself. She had already won. She put her phone away and went back to reading. It was a new chapter, and she didn't need to relive the old ones anymore. Forgiveness wasn't in the answer. It was in the silence. Julia lived intensely, and now, with serenity. She learned that love can hurt, but it can also heal, and that no one has the power to destroy her except herself. She suffered, she fell, she cried, but she got up, and she became everything anyone could ever imagine. A calm hurricane, A silent scream. A woman who not only survived but flourished.